There have been some entertaining and somewhat accidentally satirical occurrences on campus during these model Hamas protests. This is a good example of the accidentally satirical. Some Princeton University students offered this in formally announcing, because it requires a formal announcement,
right,
of their hunger strike, so everyone would know why.
Solidarity with the people of Gaza. We are drawing from the tradition of Palestinian political prisoners going on saltwater-only hunger strikes in Israeli prisons since 1968.
Our hunger strike is a response to the administration's refusal to engage with our demands for dissociation and divestment from Israel. We refuse to be silenced by the university administration's intimidation and repression tactics. We struggle together in solidarity with the people of Palestine. We commit our bodies to their liberation.
We will abstain from all food and drink except water until the following demands are met. Meet with students to discuss their demands for disclosure, divestment, and a full academic and cultural boycott of Israel. Grant complete amnesty from all criminal and disciplinary charges for participants of the peaceful sit-in. Reverse all campus bans and evictions of students. The university and the world must recognize that we refuse to be complicit in genocide and will take every necessary action to change this reality. Our hunger strike, though small in comparison to the enduring suffering of the Palestinian people, symbolizes our unwavering commitment to justice and solidarity.
All right, now let's everybody grab some lunch, and we'll get back at it after a bite to eat.
I love it. No drinks or food except water.
Okay. Are you sure there's nothing else that you demand? Okay. And then there was this other event. I don't know which is more ridiculous.
What?
There was a bunch of students dressed up as doves, literally like in a dove costume, like Halloween, because they're doves of peace. And so this Insta guy, and of course, it completely misses them that they're being ridiculed. This Insta guy named The Real Bigley interviewed some of the doves, got a little off topic, and it was a little unnerving to them, because they're monomaniacal.
We're dressed as doves to symbolize peace for the Palestinian people.
We're being encouraged to really embody birds.
Can I help you? Oh, this is like a tag team dove situation. Yeah. What's your take on open relationships?
I don't have one.
Would you be in one?
No.
Do you think it's ethical to go through your partner's phone?
This is wild. This is super not about Palestine.
But just hypothetically?
Just hypothetically and realistically, not interested in talking about things that are not Palestinian liberation right now. Cool.
I just see TikToks. After being a bird, do you think it's ethical for people to own birds as pets and stuff?
I don't know if it's a question of ethics, really.
Do you feel comfortable owning one?
I personally don't. I'm a big bird watcher, and I love observing birds in the wild.
That is awesome. Where was that?
Does not surprise me. That does not surprise me. Where was that? It's everywhere.
Oh, that's cool.
It's everywhere. By the way, it's just a point of order, for all the, nobody's going to get hired. They're going to lose their internship to Goldman Sachs and so on and so forth. Not everywhere. Not everywhere. Remember, we're all on a college campus now. And so it's complicated. And so, for example, the founder of HIMSS, he's actively supporting, calling on these kids to apply. That companies like his, which provides prescription drugs via the internet or something, are going to hire these kids. We just talked about who's funding all these student organizations: billionaire leftists, the Rockefellers and the Pritzkers and the Soroses. So this idea that they're going to rue the day because they're going to lose their sinecure in high finance or some other corporate America, some other institution. I don't know. Even at the blue collar level, if you will, the UAW has a Gaza policy. Sean Fain, who is just obnoxious, he's the president of the United Auto Workers. They're announced their solidarity with the Hamas sympathizers. the mass arrest or intimidation of those exercising the right to protest, strike, or speak out against injustice, and so on and so forth. He also said the war is wrong. He said all kinds of things, and he's perfectly within his right to say the things that he wants to say. But, I mean, it just gives you an insight. Don't be so sure that, they're just covering their faces because they aren't going to be able to get jobs and they know this. They don't want to be. It's more like criminal prosecution. Maybe it's some concern. Maybe it's still a sop to COVID. They don't have functioning brains. They just have political cant milling about in between their ears. And so it's confusing, it's contradictory, it's complicated, even though they don't seem to be very. For more on this, Chris Ferguson joins us, professor of psychology at Stetson University in Florida, author of Catastrophe, The Psychology of Why Good People Make Bad Situations Worse. And you can read his musings at his Substack, Grimoire Manor.substack.com, Grimoire Manor. I'll have to get the backstory on that. By the way, had him on a podcast recently, too, because Ferguson was one of the academics who did that big study on criminal sentencing over a 16-year period. I think it was like from 2005 to 2021, and essentially concluded that there's no real evidence of systemic racism influencing criminal sentencing in the American justice system. It's a really good study. It's an important one, too. It hasn't gotten as much attention as it deserves for obvious reasons. But I digress. Professor Ferguson, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on this morning.
So what's the Substack Grimoire? What's the reference?
Grimoire Manor. I actually started it to publish a little bit of fiction. So it's kind of getting the name from that. Yeah. So I have a book that's coming out in the summer, The Secrets of Grimoire Manor. So it's kind of named after that, but. It's easier to write nonfiction than fiction, so most of the Substack is writing about science and a little bit of politics and other things.
It's hard to separate fiction from nonfiction these days. Just when you think you're making something up, it just turns out to be foreshadowing. What is your review of the situation on college campuses and what it should tell us about the collegiate atmosphere these days, if we didn't already know?
Yeah, I mean, the things that sort of interest me about the protests are really I have two kind of interests. One is, are they working? And two, what is the real motivation, behind the people that are participating in them? So there's actually is some data on like how to do a good protest, and what kind of things convince the public. And you kind of pointed out some pretty satirical, funny things that are going on in some of these protests, and there are lots of other examples. And I would say these protests are, if the goal of these protests was to somehow increase people's sympathy, for Palestinians, they're not going well. This is just not working out very well. Generally speaking, you want to appeal to people's patriotism. You want to say that you're just some of the regular people, and you just have this thing that you want people to pay more attention to. You want to seem like the sane people in the room, and these protests are doing pretty much the opposite of that. They look like an occupying power to some extent. They're taking down American flags. They're coming across pretty aggressive, and look, people do have the right to say whatever they want, of course, but they're doing things like barricading parts of campuses, occupying buildings, and people don't, I guess, always realize that that's not actually covered in free speech. Like, you're not actually allowed to do that,
right?
Sort of thing. So you will get arrested, and that's okay if you feel like you're that passionate, you still want to do that. I mean, just don't be surprised when the police show up and and arrest you. But I think that just like the 2020 protests and riots over George Floyd, and a lot of like the Just Stop Oil stuff, and I don't think that these protests are really about Palestine. I mean, people are using that issue, but I think a lot of it is just this is a group of young people with some outside agitators who are pushing them on in some cases. Who this is really about them. They want to be the hero. They want to be getting a lot of attention. They want to feel like they're doing something important. And the issue doesn't really matter that much. I mean, they might think it is. I'm not saying they're lying, but but I think a lot of this has to do with just giving the middle finger to daddy, trying to feel like you're a hero, and I don't think these people are very informed about what's actually happening.
No, there was this great man on the street interview where somebody asked, why are you here at this protest that was going on in the street or on campus, doesn't really matter. And the young girl says, I'm here to support the cause. And it was perfect. It's almost Randian in terms of the response. The cause. It doesn't matter what the cause is. And this speaks to something else that a lot of intellectuals have been wrestling with, which is this how we're going from this one social panic to the next. We're just careening from one to the next. So we've gone from, Black Lives Matter, this. I mean, these are all, we had this conversation with Lionel Shriver actually last week, that it's mania, and it's just nonstop.
Absolutely. And like I said, I mean, the tactics are not very good. I mean, if you think about even things like the Just Stop Oil people who are gluing themselves to roads, or, stopping traffic and ambulances can't get through and all this kind of stuff. That stuff is absolutely counterproductive, in terms of actually advancing your advocacy goal. I mean, even assuming that the goal is a worthwhile one, these are exactly the things you don't want to do. You don't want to anger the general public, because that will turn them against your cause. So that's what sort of interesting me is, like, what are these people really thinking about? I mean, they must kind of know that tearing down an American flag and putting out the Hamas flag in its place is not going to win over a lot of hearts and minds in the general public. And the polls are bearing that out. I mean, we can see that these protests are not having a positive impact.
No,
but here in Chicago, they let them keep doing it. I mean, they've shut down the entrance to O'Hare 2 times now, and they waited hours before they arrested people, and then they arrest them, and then they just release them so they can do it again.
Well, but so that's the point, is that what if it's not about winning hearts and minds? What if it's not about persuasion? What if, and they maybe not at the campus level, the kids intense, but what at a little bit higher level where there's more thought, it is about a motivated minority rolling over a incredulous majority, and it's and that happens a lot in history, and it's a power grab, and when you see institutions and the heads of these institutions defer, then that is provocative, and they roll on. I mean, when you see the Democrat Party, you see the President of the United States essentially defer, that is provocative, and they roll on. They think they can grab it. They don't have to persuade people to get it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the trick for authorities is they see themselves as being in a difficult spot. And on one hand, I mean, one thing that I think authorities are aware of is that tends to increase sympathy towards protests is if authorities come across as, cracking down too hard. So if there's an over response by authorities, then people tend to become, more sympathetic towards the protesters. But on the other hand, if you do, as you're saying, if you do nothing, if you give in to the demands, or you fail to prosecute, when crimes have been committed and things like that, then, basically, deterrence works as well, right? So if you have no deterrence for a bad behavior, then that bad behavior will increase in frequency. And if you give in to some of these demands, that are unreasonable, for instance, then that's going to create more protests in the future. So, yeah, I think authorities are kind of trying to have it both ways a little bit, and thread the needle a bit, and I'm not sure that is working again. Where I've seen a few universities have caved to protesters and stuff, for instance. I don't think that's going to work out very well for those universities. I think they're going to end up with more problems down the road.
No question. I mean, Columbia University just announced it's canceling its student-wide graduation. That's happening elsewhere. USC did. You had. And the other thing, too, is when you see these knuckleheads interrupt the University of Michigan graduation and parents are standing up shouting them down with chants of USA, USA, what does that tell you about where the adults are of the student and your student body? It seems to me that this is a problem writ large, which is you draw lines you don't intend to defend and they get erased, and then you don't know where to redraw them, or you're no longer in a position to redraw them because you deferred. So those who draw lines and man the lines, everybody, here are the clear lines, and you cross them, and this is what's going to happen, and then that's what happens. That seems to me a very simple organizing philosophy.
Yeah. Well, I think the trick for universities too is they've really painted themselves in a corner over the last 5 to 10 years, perhaps, in the sense that in some of these cases, universities are trying to take principled stances on free speech, and that's great. I mean, they should, but historically they haven't, right? So they've been for the last few years canceling people over issues around Black Lives Matter or Roe v. Wade or a whole variety of other issues where students or faculty have been on the quote wrong side of history or something of that sort, and they've absolutely destroyed careers, and so universities don't really have much credibility on this issue of free speech, and then when they're in some cases appear to be defending it, even in cases where students or protesters have crossed some obvious legal lines.
Well, right.
Then it comes across as hypocritical.
Yeah, free speech. We're making a statement on free speech, and they have every right to do this and do that. Meanwhile, conservative speaker wants to come speak. Absolutely not. We're right. I mean, it's so ham-handed. They're so pathetic. Professor Chris Ferguson, he's a professor of psychology at Stetson University in Florida, author of Catastrophe: The Psychology of Why Good People Make Bad Situations Worse. You can check out my podcast with Chris at Am Greatness. We talked about that a little bit. Also his Substack, grimoiremanor.substack.com, GRIMOIRE manor.substack.com. Chris, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
It's always a pleasure. Have a good day.
Thanks, you too. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
It's news, opinion, insight. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
When the storms hit Chicagoland this spring and your home or business has water damage, ProTech Restoration is ready 24/7. The certified team at ProTech Restoration will be there quickly and work directly with your insurance. But even in between the storms, if you come across water in your basement, bathroom, or kitchen due to leaking pipes, an appliance breakdown, or sump pump failure, know that ProTech Restoration has seen it all and knows what to do. They are a leading Chicagoland emergency